In honor of Women's History Month, Acker is thrilled to present our Women in Wine series, available to stream on our Instagram and YouTube channels. So please subscribe to experience all of our incredible content. We have an exciting roster lined up of some wonderful women who are invigorating the wine industry. My name is Lily Mirabel Friedman, and I'm honored to be joined today by Diana Snowden Seysses of Snowden Vineyards in Napa Valley, Domaine Dujac in Burgundy, and Domaine de Triennes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Arms in many parts of the wine world. Diana, where are you joining us from today?
I am in my home in Nuit Saint-Georges, France, where I've been since the onset of COVID.
Well, one day we'll all get to leave home, but not today.
No.
How is 2020 and 2021 shaping up in all of the places that you are involved?
Well, let's see. 2020 was tough. I think it was tough on all levels. And at the same time, you know, I have had traumatic vintages before, and somehow there's always this reminder from Mother Nature in the wines themselves, because, you know, even here in Burgundy, where we didn't have the dramatic fires that we had in California, it was a hard, hot, dry vintage, and the wines are now post-mallow, and they are really beautiful and just a reminder of the resilience of Mother Nature. So that is very uplifting. I'm expecting some 2020 samples, which are actually from California, which are currently snagged in customs, just to follow up on that very subject, but I'll know more in about a week. It was tough, you know, 2020 in California was tough. I was not able to be there myself, and so I was making decisions over the phone. I never thought I'd get to that place in my career, because I really am hands-on, and you know, I don't believe in winemaking protocols. I really feel like you have to taste and make decisions day by day according to what you perceive was going on in the tank. And so it was hard for me to decide not to go to California. But with COVID, it just didn't seem responsible. It felt too far from my children. And then the fires took off, and we had a bunch of heat waves as well. And so, you know, many of my friends and colleagues said, "Oh, you didn't miss anything," but it's still, it was really hard. So I'm suspending judgment on the wines until I have them here, and they'll be here any minute now. 2021 is just beginning. We would love rain in California. That is something we very much need. So if anyone feels like doing rain dances on our behalf, we'll take those. Burgundy, on the other hand, has had a nice winter, and we love that, because those cold temperatures decompact the soils, and we feel that's really important to kind of sanitizing naturally the soils and winery. So it's off to a good start. We were just at Triennes last week. It was absolutely beautiful. Spring is the best time to walk in vineyards. It just makes you feel so uplifted. And that has been a long project, getting Triennes to somewhere where we want it to be. And we really are there. You can feel the power of organics in the vineyards. And we have solar panels on the roofs, and we have a little pond, and we're reforesting. And so it's this really exciting project of moving the wines to a harmonious place.
You've certainly been, particularly during the pandemic, one of the big kind of voices about climate change and global warming in winemaking. And it's been very exciting to hear what you've had to say, and hopefully we can touch on it again in this conversation. But I want to start with your beginning. You did grow up somewhat in the wine industry, but perhaps you didn't always dream of being in the wine industry. So what was your dream job growing up?
You know, actually, I was thinking about that. I don't know if I was a total space cadet, or I just didn't think into the future. I grew up in Napa, and I was a total tomboy. I climbed trees and I munched on Cabernet, and it never occurred to me that that would be my future. And I'm not sure I had any particular plans for myself. When I went to UC Davis, I went undeclared. I didn't have a major. I didn't really, I was good at science, that I knew, and I liked science. And I just went to Davis because it felt like a good environment and the right distance from home. And you know, even though the seed of winemaking was definitely planted, it just sort of felt like it fell on me, because I came back from Davis freshman year to my house in St. Helena, and my dad, just kind of typical American, he's like, "Welcome home, get a job." And there I was in the Napa Valley. So I called my best friend Chiara Mondavi's father, Tim, and I got a job working at Robert Mondavi. And that was when I went back to Davis, declared my major, and never looked back.
So you were in the wine industry, but weren't even really aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, my family grew grapes and sold them. So it's a really different attachment, or rather non-attachment. You're really just looking for tonnage. Because yeah, that's what you're getting paid for. So the land was always there, and we loved going up to the property. There's no building up there, but we had a pool. That was the big draw. But we loved going up and exploring the woods. It's 170 acres. Most of it is forest, and only 23 are planted. And so it was just this this beautiful wilderness and place to be with my cousins and my sister and my family. And it just felt very non-pressure, and just this kind of, oh, there's the vineyards, and didn't feel like it was anything that was tied to my future.
Was there perhaps a pivotal wine you tasted that made you fall in love with the wine business?
Yeah, I mean, I would feel like my life is dotted by these road signs in the form of bottles. But yes, when I was in my upper division courses at UC Davis, Ann Noble, who is a very powerful female figure in the wine business, and certainly at UC Davis, scared the hell out of all of us. I mean, she was so particular about what you were allowed to use as descriptors. And usually a descriptor had to correspond to a molecule, or it was not a valid descriptor. It was too subjective and just confusing, and was bad for the wine industry. And so one day she poured us blind an Arajo 93 that Mia Klein had donated, so women upon women upon women. And she called on me and she said, Diana, what do you think about this wine? And when you first start talking about wines, and I was young, and it was terrifying. It's like, all of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of the dance floor, in the middle of that circle, and you're on to do something. So Diana, what do you think about this wine? And I just thought it was incredible. I had stuck it in my nose in the glass, and it was like I saw my future. And I said, I think it's beautiful. And I knew this was feeble and not going to cut it, but she actually let it slide because the wine just was beautiful. And I ended up getting an internship at Arajo before I moved to France, and they offered me a job. It was one of those crossroads of my life. They offered me a job after I finished UC Davis, and I said, thank you very much, but I'm moving to France.
A different path, of course. Have there been, since you mentioned a few other kind of touchstone bottles, are there any others that really stand out?
Yes. So when I moved to France, then I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I don't know anybody. I don't speak French. And it felt very gutsy. And I remember being on the terrace at Dujac, and we were having lunch, and it was a beautiful day. And Jacques, he has a special strut when he's walking with something he's kind of a wine he's proud of, and he's just kind of struts up with this bottle and pours all of us the wine. And it was like a message again saying, oh, you have done the right thing. You are where you should be. And it was a Morey Village, 1999 Morey Village. And it was just in its youth and just absolutely gorgeous, and just told me to stop worrying, and I was where I should be.
It's a powerful wine, especially people often think of those kind of Grand Cru, specifically wines that are the aha moments for them. But to point to, especially for Dujac, the Morey Village as the wine makes a lot of sense.
I love Morey Village. Jacques loves Morey Village. I mean, we're all really proud of Morey Village. It's easy to cherry pick the Grand Crus, but there's also something just kind of delicious and earthy and visceral about Morey Village.
Especially in 99,
Yeah.
So you have the pleasure and privilege of being involved in the wine industry in 2 countries with very different cultures. So what have been the most noticeable differences between working as a woman in wine in America versus in France?
Well, yes, I would say.
You could say none.
No, it is different. And it is important to say that women are still only 10% of winemakers. And so we're still the exception in both places. I think that in France and in Europe, there's a tendency to sort of talk very openly about things like that, and in a way that would sound quite offensive in the US. So yeah, I got some real frank comments, but it was not malicious. It was just recognizing the exotic and the other. But it, when I was in Bordeaux, oh my God, when I was in Bordeaux, I was the only intern, and I, was spending days getting the winery ready all by myself. And I came and saw someone and said, okay, I've done this, this, and this. What should I do next? And he said, le repassage. Sounds like you speak French. Exactly. I did not know what that meant, but I could tell from the smug look on his face that he had said something really annoying. And so I looked up later in my dictionary that night, it was ironed in my memory, repassage, the ironing. So yeah, it's kind of this very upfront sexism, whereas it's if you can encounter sexism, it's much more hidden and subversive in Napa. So I would say it's actually easier to deal with in Burgundy. But on the whole, I think that the era is ripe to accept women, and people like Mia Klein and others before me had already cleared the ground with a pickaxe. And so it was ready for me to come in, and I'm making more ground for the generation coming after me. And I think that, when I first got hired at Domaine Dujac, part of my job was overseeing the interns. We have 4 spots in the winery every year. And I said, okay, great. Every year, at least one of these spots has to be a woman. And at this stage, now I have to say, okay, at least one spot has to be a man. We have so many female applicants, and I can think of so many young female winemakers in this, this new generation coming on. And so I think that there's been a real shift.
I have to say that given that you came to France with no French experience, no French speaking experience whatsoever, I listened to your TED Talk in French, and it was pretty impressive. Your French is like seamlessly perfect and just really, really nice.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I practiced that quite a lot. And I don't remember if I got edited out or not, but you have to memorize, your 13 minutes or 15 minutes of speech. And I skipped a part, which I realized once the photo came out, and halfway through, there's a point where I say, oh shit. Oops. I don't know if you saw that. Anyway, it completely derailed me. Thank you. Now, French, it took, I've been here 22 years, and it took a while. I had done 1 year of college French at UC Davis, but I had done 9 years of Spanish. That helped a lot. And I remember after 5 years in France, our foreman gave me the best compliment. He said, "C'est génial, maintenant on comprend tout ce que tu dis." So he said, "It's wonderful. Now we understand everything you say," which was my favorite compliment, because you have to throw yourself out there. For 5 years, I was incomprehensible, but I was trying.
I mean, after 5 years, that's pretty, what more could you have hoped for? Maybe a little bit sooner, but who knows?
It was such a frank compliment. I really appreciated it.
So what have been the greatest challenges in building your career?
I think the hardest thing, and it's always, intertwined with the best thing, but working in families is tough. There's just no question. It is really hard. But it's also, if it weren't for my grandparents buying, property in the Napa Valley, and me marrying into a family that owns a winery, well, I wouldn't have, hop skipped to the top of the old pyramid so quickly. So they come hand in hand, but it is hard. It is hard to every day, have those family dynamics every single day, all day long, and then also negotiate the transition from one generation to the next. There's just no question that it's tough.
Definitely. And I would think that you have children, so that has to be something that you think about, at least, of what and whether they will join you or not.
Yeah. I have thought about that. I mean, I of course probably very arrogantly think I'm going to do a great job of that transition, and having taken careful notes about how the generation before me could have improved, but I'm sure I'll be just as difficult when the day comes.
You certainly come from and are a part of 2 big wine families. Perhaps you had a mentor within your family or outside of your family. Did you have a mentor in the wine industry at all?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and many. I think, gosh, I mean, if we're sticking to women, I've had so many women that have, and men who have helped in different ways. I mean, I got a lot of different work experience, and that always has been helpful. I think UC Davis doesn't put a big emphasis on work experience, but because my dad was that kind of old school, get a job type of person. By the time I graduated, I had 4 harvests under my belt, which was more than anybody else. And every step of the way, you learn something, from tricks to strategies. So yeah, I think as much as you can do practical work, um, it always serves you. And I do think I was good at listening to myself. A lot of women who are UC Davis graduates end up in the lab, and we just naturally get funneled into the laboratory because it is physical. And I just knew that that was not for me, and never got tricked with that, because I think that is very repetitive. I mean, I'm sure there are people who take great joy in getting that right, and that's an important part of a team, but it was not going to be right for me.
Did you grow up at all with that kind of earlier generation of women in the Napa Valley?
Well, so when I was at Araujo, first of all, Daphne Araujo is a force, and so elegant at the same time, which is, you know, a very neat trick. But the winemaker was Françoise Pichon, and she had young kids, and so I got a up close and personal look at what that looks like, harvest with young kids. And they would, you know, they would come to the winery at the end of the day, and I would stick them on a rolling chair from the office and run them up and down the cellar, the caves, and walk around with the vineyards, in the vineyards, with them on my shoulders. And just it was one of those important just life lessons of how you do pull off that balance. Yeah, so there have been so many women. I was very lucky to work with Anne-Claude Leflevre when I moved to France, and she was, of course, you know, a very early voice for biodynamics, and she was a socialist, and she lived by her beliefs every day. We had lunch together, provided by the Domaine, and she was there also. And she and I got special girl menus. I could have had the boy menu, but it was essentially a choice between sauteed potatoes and salade verte. And so that was just a really special time, and just seeing again how she lived her beliefs, both running a business and farming.
Do you have a favorite trait about yourself?
Gosh. I think that, so I'm dyslexic. I should just throw that out there.
Me
Dyslexia,
too.
really?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So dyslexia, and you probably know, is on the same spectrum as autism. And I think that too often there is, you know, they get categorized. There's a lot of overlap. But because I have a very rich inner world, as you know, a lot of autists do, I don't sweat a lot of the small stuff. I mean, a lot of the small stuff I don't even see. And I think that is actually, you know, a big benefit, that I am just like, ooh, you know. I didn't notice that I'm a girl and shouldn't be here, and I'm jumping on the forklift because no one gave me the memo that I can't. And I think that has really served me.
That's fantastic, and something that people should champion and be excited about versus something to hide from, I certainly think.
Yeah, no, I would, if I weren't so worried about climate change, I would be working on dyslexia awareness, but it feels like it's lower down the urgency totem pole. But I have a son who's very dyslexic also.
So I'm interested always to hear about how people approach risk. You definitely took a big risk in moving to France and starting a new life there. Do you generally consider yourself a risk taker?
No, it's true. I don't know if it's risk so much as very decisive. I am ruthlessly decisive. And I mean, again, yes, I moved to France. I just sort of add things up in my head, and once it becomes obvious that the calculation has been made, I just do it. You know, my son is very dyslexic, and I never pictured what has ended up. He goes to boarding school in the UK, so I have to split my time between France, the United States and the United Kingdom. And it's just sort of, the French don't have this approach to education that allows for alternative learning. And so slash and burn, this is what we're doing. He's going there and forget the French system. And so, I think I'm just very clear about where I want to be, and not very patient trying to change systems that seem dysfunctional. And that is probably something I need to work on.
Or not.
Yeah.
I mean, so rarely do people call themselves decisive. And I think that's a real blessing. I don't have that skill at all. So to hear about someone who's like very decisive, once I have it all laid out, I can pro and con it to get to a decision. But in terms of being decisive off the bat, no, not at all. So yeah. Great for you.
I mean, all qualities have the flip side, which is also a flaw. So, it's just, it's life's rich tapestry.
You certainly have a lot of projects going on, a lot of involvement all over the country and the world. But in a year like this, well, now we're in our second year now, but how do you stay motivated?
It's been tough. I mean, it has been tough. Not going to California, I really grieved about that, because I deliberately take a somewhat subordinate role at Dujac because it allows me to have my career in California. But I love my role at Dujac. I feel like I am a sponge, and I have learned as much as I can, and I give the best of myself to our whole production team. And ultimately, the number one decision maker is my husband, Jeremy, even though we all work together. But when push comes to shove, he's top dog, and that's hard for an ambitious feminist like me. And to miss my creative moment of the year in California, that was really tough. So I had to latch on to something else to do productive with that time. And I just threw myself into climate change and how the wine industry can be powerful and to affect positive change. And that was also, there's just a lot of learning curve in terms of how bad a situation we actually are in. But at the same time, all of these exciting new technologies and possibilities for the future, and that I do know that we have everything we need. It's just a matter of us all agreeing with me. So yeah, I think, again, it was just this equation of what is available to me in this moment, and just going into it and taking each day one at a time, because there were days when I just felt overwhelmingly depressed by the situation, just like everyone else. But at the same time, the connection I got out of this, offering this information to the world, was so uplifting, and everybody came with new thoughts, new ideas, and that was wonderful. So the sense of community was great.
I'll ask you now, I guess, what do you think are kind of the hopeful moments, or what we should be looking forward to from, as wine drinkers, as wine consumers, as people that are looking to be educated about wine, in terms of global warming for the next 5 or 10 years?
I think it is going to be important for all of us to do on a small scale what I just did, and really take the time to make the kind of, there's going to be this, I just bought the Bill Gates book on climate change, and it's great. But one of the pillars of his road to getting to a better place is going to be giving up organics, and that is something we all have to prepare ourselves for, because there's a lot of data coming out that if you farm organically, of course, you're making more tractor passes because of the whole glyphosate and glyphosate resistant crops. And you have to be very careful, because if you examine the situation just from the point of view of carbon, then you're going to make a really huge, dangerous mistake of things like glyphosate and other pollutants to try and get yourself out of this situation. And so we really have to, I am going to be pushing to hang on to organics, get the word out about how detrimental glyphosate is to ecosystems, and that we don't have really good data on the carbon dioxide absorbing capacity of a living soil versus a dead soil. And so a dead soil being one that is applied, it has got glyphosate applications. So, so we really have to hang on to the things that we have built in the last 2 decades, because I think that organics is one of them. And then, you know, mindfully pick and choose from those technologies and build upon, you know, already you have to farm organically. You can't have any concessions on that point, and then add to it reforestation as you can. And then add to that the, you know, the elephant in the room, which is our packaging. Bottles, we have to find an alternative to glass, or we have to get back in the habit of refilling bottles like in the 1950s, the bottles of milk. And then add on to that the exciting possibilities for carbon dioxide capture during fermentation. And the other big pile of carbon that we can do something with, which is to say our woody cuttings when we prune. That is another source of carbon that we can use to get, as an industry, go negative, which is what we're going to have to do to sop up the decades of carbon dioxide emissions. So I think it's, you know, it's talking about it, and all of us understanding what we can do on our own scale to get to negative emissions in the Paris Agreement.
There's a lot that we need to do. It's a little,
Yeah.
it's a bit daunting, but it seems like at least you have a plan, and that's good.
Yeah, I think, you know, you have to do it slowly and little by little. I went through a lot of emotional up and downs, and, you know, when you feel like you're getting there, just take a step back. You know, at one point I had to put down my studies, and I decided, right, I'm going to keep bees because this is just too upsetting. And so I just threw myself into something that felt very positive, and then picked up the chemistry and the climate models again 6 months later.
You mentioned a sense of community and the community around the wine world. Is that kind of what you love about the wine industry? Is there something else that you really love about this business?
Oh my gosh, I love so many things. Yes, I think ultimately connection is what wine is about. Yes, but you can take that so many directions. And, you know, terroir, for me, terroir means connection. It is not just a map and lines on a map. You know, part of the terroir definition is people and the way you farm, and the fact that the way you farm actually has a genetic impact on your plant material. That's been proven at this point. And I would go so far as to say that the emotional state of your employees can be felt like a signature on your wine. And so all of these things are, terroir is community, terroir is ecosystem, and you are connecting to a place and a time, and you are connecting to your team, and you're connecting to the people who eventually drink your wine. And it's this beautiful, vibrating web of life.
Well, a great summary of the wine world. and a redefinition of terroir that I don't think people think about. So very perfect.
Yeah.
When you look back at your career, though you're still very much in the midst of it, are there specific moments that stand out?
Yes, for sure. I mean, 2011 was a real milestone for me as a winemaker. You know, when I first started making wine for Snowden, so I've been commuting since 2005. We were in a very bad financial situation where we had to bulk out almost 3 vintages because of Brettanomyces infection. And I was just 27 at that time, and I'd never worked a full vintage with Cabernet. I'd worked some full years in Burgundy, but I hadn't done one in California. We took on David Ramey as a winemaking consultant, and he's wonderful. David has just got such a smart combination of old world and new world, and he's got an amazing palate. But he also is very business savvy, and 2005 was pretty cool. And I was, you know, young, and I was like, isn't this great? We're going to have ripe phenols without high alcohols. And he said, yeah, Diana, I wouldn't overthink it. Parker's not going to like it. And so he's bummed about the vintage. And I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. And so for a couple years, I mean, that was what we were doing. And I got to the point where I just like, I couldn't, I was hanging out with all these Burgundy geeks. There's nothing less cool than California Cabernet. And I was embarrassed about my own wines. And finally I said, I can't, we're going to have to pull back on hang time. And he also simultaneously, perhaps a couple years later, got to that same place. And in 2011, it was super rainy. It was this, really, really wet vintage. And at that point, we'd already stopped working together. And that was always the design, was he was going to work with me until I felt comfortable enough to do it on my own. And everybody in Napa was kind of either chaptalizing or reverse osmosing or bleeding heavily to try and turn the vintage into a typical California vintage with high alcohols. And I just said, look, I said to my father, and that was a big moment, I said, I cannot make wines that I don't believe in. I understand that you need to sell wine, but you can find another winemaker to do that. I'm not flying halfway around the world to make wines that are embarrassing. Life is too short. And that was a big moment for me. And once you do that once with your father, well, you can do it a million times. And since that point, I have been very, very clear and uncompromising on what's important.
And 11 was also a difficult vintage in Burgundy. So the pairing of the two is, I would assume, was a bit of a struggle.
It's funny, there's often an echo between the two vintages. And I can't explain that without getting into like the stars and the planets. So I'm not going to, but there's always some kind of mirror effect. 15 was the same. 15 was super ripe. And I missed all of Domaine Dujac. Usually I try to get in a bit before I fly off to California. They fell smack on top of each other. And I came back after 2015 and, trying to make wines with reasonable alcohols, and it just wasn't in the cards. And then I tasted through the 15s that Jeremy made. And I was like, Jeremy, you made fruit bombs. And he's like, yeah, I made fruit bombs.
I had to.
Yeah, he was very pleased.
Well, there you go. As you I know you're involved in the Batonnage Forum a bit, and is there a specific piece of advice or kind of a statement you'd give to the next generation of female leaders in the wine industry?
Batonnage Forum is fantastic, and I would encourage people who are just starting out to get into it. It's just this great dialogue between the old guard and the young, fresh-faced, energetic youth. And I would say, build your village. We all need a village. And here's Women's Month, and I rely on my sisters, my metaphorical sisters, to keep me honest and to be there when I need them, and I'm the same for them. So I'd say, build that village, and Batonnage Forum is a great place to begin.
Perfect. You spoke a little bit about other women in the wine world as you were coming up, and I was curious if there's any women winemakers making wine currently that you'd like to mention other than yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited about this young generation, like the Rinaldi sisters. They're just killing it. I'm so excited. And Chiara Pepe, I just talked to her. She just took over, and I'm just so excited. That's a huge operation, and she's going to be great, and Lafarge, Clotilde Lafarge. Those wines sparkle. So no, I'm really, and Cyrielle Rousseau. I'm just so excited about all these young women that are coming on and maintaining their family domains for this generation.
It's been really exciting to hear and speak with so many women this month who are the daughters of rather than the sons of, and how that change has really taken place around the world in this kind of present moment and what's to come, both for history and for the wines. I think it's a big shift and exciting what'll happen.
I think you can see it. Yeah, it looks like also Kathy Corison has hooked her daughters. It's looking like it's happening.
Looking like it's happening. So looking past the jumble that is 2020 and 2021, do you have a vision of what's in store for the future of the wine world? perhaps beyond global warming and the efforts we can do to try to rein.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's along the same vein, but I'm also excited about more diversity in wine. You know, there's been too many men and there's been too many white men and too many white privileged men. And I think that, yeah, more inclusivity, more diversity is just great for the industry and great for all of us. So, you know, enhanced perspective is just, it's a really exciting change in moment. And I'm so happy to see it happening.
Great. Do you have any plans for yourself for the year to come as we get past COVID?
Let's see. Gosh, no, I think it's going to stay pretty unexciting. But no, I'm just looking forward to getting back to California, and yeah, we have been trying to. We don't have our own facility at Snowden. That's been a big next step, and but it's looking. We have something that we're tentatively looking at, and I have hooked in all of the members of my generation to care about this. So that's pretty exciting on a personal and professional level. Yeah.
I know you have arms in many places. Is there a dream project that you'd like to pursue in the future?
Gosh, you know, I think I am pretty full. I I have had so many little pipe dreams. And right now, I think that, yeah, just doing right by the projects that I'm currently engaged in is really what I'm going to try and keep doing from now until the end of my days. Maybe if I solve climate change, get all of the family domains successfully into the next generation, then I will open my Barba Papa school for dyslexics and autists. Do you know the Barba Papa books?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that between, you just said that you're going to solve climate change. I just want to put that out there, that you stated that as a fact, and that's pretty big.
On my vision board.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I greatly appreciate your optimism, your positivity, and it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today and learn a bit more about your decisive presence in 2 countries and the future of global warming on the wine world. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your time with us. And thank you so much for celebrating Women's History Month with Acker. Cheers.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, cheers.
Have a great day. Thank you.